Hello everybody and welcome to the June meeting of the Zonta Says Now Intercontinental think tank. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat line. As you can tell, we're recording today's meeting, but any conversations we have in the breakout rooms, they won't be in the final recording. We've got quite a program, so we might as well get started. In the chat line, if you could please say hello and where you're joining from today, that would be great. And we're delighted to welcome members of district and international advocacy committees and first-timers to the think tank. Each month, we highlight a United Nations International Day. And well, yesterday was the World Day to combat desertification and drought. And the theme this year is Her Land, Her Rights. And nearly half of the global agricultural workforce is female, yet less than 1 in 5 landholders worldwide are women. Women cannot inherit their husband's property in over 100 countries under customary, religious or traditional laws and practices. And globally, women already spend a collective 200 million hours a day collecting water. In some countries, a trip to collect water can take over an hour. And this leaves less time for women to seek other work, be educated or rest. So check out the UN report on the differentiated impact of desertification, land degradation, and drought on women and men, because it makes interesting reading. As usual, our meeting today will be co-hosted by members of the Zonta Says Now working group. But we'll just take a minute to remind ourselves why Zonta Says Now to gender equal climate action. This train was built during the Industrial Revolution, a time when humans started to put more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And these are accumulating, forming a blanket around the planet and causing global warming and associated extreme weather events. Extreme droughts, fires, floods and storms trigger social disruption, causing millions of people to lose their livelihoods and homes. This social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. Zonta Says Now stops the train by taking climate action and closing the gender equality gaps. We use 3 tools to achieve this. We have our website, we have our think tanks, and we have our framework for action. We're guided by the Zonta International Statement on Climate Change and have links to many resources to help us on our climate journey. I'm going to hand over to Dilruba. I just want to see if she's here, if she's online, because sometimes she has difficulty connecting. I don't see her there, so I'll just carry on. Okay. So what have we done since the last meeting? Well, there's 3 main actions. The first was to circulate 2 draft leaflets about Zonta Says Now framework for action. And these were circulated with the meeting agenda. The first leaflet can be used as a handout at meetings and workshops. It's got a simplified framework for action on one side, and the other side has ideas on how to gather the facts, lead by example, use our voice, advocate, and collaborate. The second leaflet contains some frequently asked questions. We've sent the leaflets to Zonta International to review, and if you have any comments on the leaflets, we'd love to hear them. So just email us and we can take them into account. Our second action was to continue to liaise with Zonta International regarding our surveys. We explained last month that we have developed separate surveys for members, club presidents and district governors. The aim of them is to get a baseline of members' understanding of gender equal climate justice, their awareness of climate change, and what actions they are taking now. We want to identify knowledge gaps, find out what clubs and districts have done so we can learn from each other and see how comfortable members are in advocating for this cause. The results will help us develop resources to fill any gaps and support members on their Zonta Says Now journey. The working group found the surveys took between 3 and 8 minutes to complete, and we hope to hear from Zonta International soon when they will be released. Our last action was to finish collating ideas for action from our discussions to strengthen the role of women in disaster preparedness. We would like some volunteers to help fine-tune the responses because we're a bit close to them. So if you could just please indicate in the chat line if you would like to help by reviewing them, that would be appreciated. And finally, in the last meeting, we had 2 great speakers, Shanazta Nathani from Sri Lanka and Pamela Morgan from the USA. And Pamela was Zonta's representative at the UN. If you missed their talks or any of the previous ones we've had from members in New Zealand, Ghana, Switzerland, Nigeria, Bangladesh or USA, you can see them at the zontasaysnow.org.au website. Anyway, I'm going to hand over now to Pia from Sweden, who is a meteorologist, to share some recently released international reports with us. Over to you, Pia.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, it's nice to see you all here. Since our last meeting, 3 reports have come out that I'd like to bring to your attention. The World Meteorological Organization, WMO, the abbreviation is, produces an annual update for the next 5 years. This year's report indicates that at least 1 year in the next 5 will be the warmest on record. The warmest year so far was in 2016, when we also had a huge El Niño. 1 year in the next 5 may exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial levels. And the next image, yep. The US National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, we call it NOAA, advised that the El Niño conditions have started in the Pacific again. So that's a phenomenon that appears in between 3 and 7 years about. It's an oscillation of sea temperature, different sea temperatures in the South Pacific, and that causes different weather situations over the planet. And they have advised that the El Niño conditions have started now. Be aware that historically record warm years due to that usually happen the year after a powerful El Niño event. So 2024 could be the world's hottest year on record. If you're not sure how El Niño and La Niña events change the world's weather, the BBC has a very good explanation. Next image. Finally, this year's UN Gender Social Norms Index has been released, and we have a long way to go to reverse gender bias. The report found that 90% of people have at least one bias. 50% believe men make better political leaders, 40% believe men make better business leaders, and an incredible 25% believe it is justified for a man to beat his wife. So now I will hand over to Angela to present our speaker for today.
Thank you, Pia, for sharing that information. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Judith Ainsworth, who is the convener of the Canada Caucus for the 2022 to 2024 biennium. Judith joined Zonta in 2008 with the Zonta Club of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. At this time, she was teaching French and Business French at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. She learned about Zonta's international projects, got to know some of the dedicated, inspiring, and fun women, and knew that's right where she wanted to be. Judith has led committees at our clubs and district levels in advocacy, the United Nations, and the Jane M. Klausman Women of Business Scholarship, and developed many presentations on these topics. In August of 2021, she was appointed to the District 2 delegate to the newly formed Canada Caucus and is now the Canada Caucus convener for this biennium. Judith holds a PhD in education, specializing in applied linguistics from the University of Montreal. She currently teaches business and professional communications at McGill University. For the past 3 years, she has taught written and oral communication courses aligned with Ashia University in Accra, Ghana. While analyzing text, her students get to hear about human rights, and many choose to present projects on practices in Africa that infringe on the rights of women to achieve their full potential. It's exciting that Zonta and the United Nations are inserted into the conversation, and Judith has connected with the Zonta clubs of Accra #2. Judith is very pleased to be part of the Zonta Says Now Intercontinental think tank, where she is learning so much about the effects of climate around the world. Thank you, Judith, and please, let's hear from you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. Great. Yeah, I'm just so enthusiastic about Zonta. I was doing a Zonta event yesterday, and this is why I've just sort of managed to get back to Montreal today. It was in Ottawa yesterday, or Canada, my new club, but yeah, and so I'm back in Montreal right now. But yeah, so can I share my slides then? Is that right? Yeah, okay. Because boy, things are happening so fast right now in Canada with climate change that I just sort of keep updating and updating these slides all the time. So yeah, climate change and how it's affecting gender in Canada. So we had the map there, and I think Angela, you probably had a more updated. I'm looking at the census in 2021, but I know that the population is expected to go up to, I think you had 38 million, maybe 39 million. Yeah, you can see the size of Canada and you can see our population. And so you would wonder why so few people, such a large landscape, we have problem with climate change. 10 provinces, 3 territories. Okay, so I'm going to talk, my presentation is divided into about 4 parts here. So escalating climate change disasters, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the local one that's happening across Canada right now. A few words to say about that, but others too. The effects on our Indigenous communities and women, some problematic greenhouse gas reduction, the policies in Canada, and I've been to a couple of great presentations. The leader of the Green Party of Canada, and she gave a presentation while I was in Ottawa. It's fabulous. And then what's happening with decision-making in Canada. Okay, so the escalating climate change disasters. So I'm going to start on the West Coast, okay, the Pacific Coast here in British Columbia. So in 2021, we had this Western heat dome, the deadliest weather event in Canada to date. And as you can see, in 4 days, from the 25th of June to the 1st of July, Canada Day, our national holiday, 619 deaths. Temperature surpassed 40 degrees Celsius. For Canada, this, especially British Columbia, very temperate climate. Doesn't get that cold in the winter or that warm in the summer, but 40 degrees unheard of. 98% of the deaths occurred indoors. Most of them, as you can see, the 2/3 of them were age 70 and over, and half of them lived alone. So you can see that age, poor housing, poverty, all of this contributed to the deaths, and women do make up the greater part of this group. Oops, so now, What happened the same year in British Columbia was flooding. And so the level of flooding was unprecedented, destroyed bridges, highways were washed out, and the province of the southern and part of the province of British Columbia cut off every major route connecting the lower mainland to the rest of Canada. So people were stranded, livestock stranded, getting goods and around the province or to people to help out. It was a real disaster. Now, I put this in here too about this, also in British Columbia, there is this mountain pine beetle population, which is growing, spreading, and it started in British Columbia, as you can see on the map, and it has jumped the Rocky Mountains. It is now in Alberta, and it's, of course, it's devastating the pine forest, the boreal forest of north central Alberta, the boreal forests in Alberta now, which tend to have less, they're less dense and they're smaller trees, so really attacking it badly. And we're not too sure just where it's going to go next because, of course, we have pine forests from one side of the country to the other. And if it heads east, it's devastating. So as you can see, the historic range, but keep this in mind, this range here, I'm just showing you the two provinces, but the next slide, I'm showing you Canada. And here is a map. If you look at the very high, so the blue colors and the green, this is where carbon is sequestered underground. Here, okay, here, like, and across the Alberta, some Saskatchewan, Ontario and Quebec for sure, and the green there out in the eastern provinces. So Canada, yeah, boreal forest, what's the big deal? Well, Canada has 25% of the Earth's wetlands and boreal forests, and both of these naturally sequester carbon in their root systems, their organic root systems, and keeps it underground, doesn't let it get out into the atmosphere. So we have more, they store more than the Amazon forest does, and about 80% of that carbon is stored in these boreal soils. But with the logging, now these forest fires, just clear cutting, all of this carbon is released into the atmosphere. And so that's part of our carbon emissions, stuff that was normally sequestered. So of course, probably heard about this, 2023, Canada's worst wildfire season of the 21st century. So this is from the Emergency Preparedness Minister. We have someone else who said from the Northern Forestry Center, Department of Natural Resources, this many fires from coast to coast at this time of year is not normal. And I just want to give a shout out. We are so happy that we have had firefighters from South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, the US, France, Portugal, Spain, Costa Rica, all of these firefighters who have come to Canada to help us because we certainly couldn't have done it on our own. So just how on fire is Canada? So a lot of things here, this I've just sort of put on this one slide. This is a real picture, by the way, from Alberta. Okay, 11 provinces and territories have been affected by thousands of fires, and they're out of control, trying to get these fires under control without any rain because there has not been any rain or very little rain. It's really, really, firefighters are just begging for rain. So we had the single largest wildfire in British Columbia, 108 forest fires in Alberta, and Alberta declared a state of emergency in the month of May. Then almost 40% of the fires are in Quebec. Been evacuating people. 34 wildfires in Newfoundland. Doesn't sound like much. The province is Newfoundland and Labrador, by the way. So 34, doesn't sound like much, but there were only 2 the previous year. So now we have 34 this year. The largest recorded forest fire in Nova Scotia history. 16,000 people were evacuated. And then this wall of smoke that came across from Quebec into Ontario and in Ottawa. And I was in Ottawa that day. And the smoke, but the smog, the pollution factor, just horrible. And it went into the United States as well. So the northern United States, the New England states were getting it all as well. So already this year, we've had 2,536 wildfires. Almost 5 million hectares of land burned, more than what was burned in 2016, 19, 20, and 22 combined. I'm not sure if you know what the size of a hectare is. A hectare is about the size of a football field. I'm not sure if it's a Canadian or American football field, but Canadian, this is American football. The Canadian field is a bit bigger. But anyways, just to let you know about the air quality. So in Ottawa and Ontario, particularly Ottawa, the peak reading on that Wednesday morning when I was in Ottawa was 500, this is particles, okay, these particles in the air, okay, early Wednesday morning, went down to 72 Wednesday afternoon. Typical for Ottawa is under 10, and we hit 500 that morning. So this fine particulate matter has been linked to premature births, worsened lung disease among the young or the most vulnerable, increased risk of heart attacks, strokes among the elderly, respiratory, cardiovascular problems. So the hospitals are definitely on standby and worried that because some of this will happen later after it all gets ingested and gets into the bloodstream of patients. So just moving on, just to mention a few more provinces and what has been happening. So the grasslands out on the prairies, they're also in danger because they are being plowed up and planted. So as you can see here, almost 150,000 acres of grassland were converted to crops. The losses in the 3 provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, 25%. A lot of Indigenous communities, of course, live out here, and they try to recover, do things to recover, get rid of the invasive plant species and try to restore it. But they say it takes up to about 100 years for the soil to recover, and it may never, ever recover. And so, of course, we've lost 25 million acres. And at the moment, Alberta and Saskatchewan only protect in the laws 1% of what is remaining. So 99% can still be destroyed. But my question again is, what's the big deal about prairie grasslands? Well, it's one of the most endangered ecosystems on the planet. And I mentioned about the Indigenous communities, for example, the Kainai Nation citizens, they harvest medicinal plants, they hunt, they hold ceremonies. It's part of their whole culture and lifestyle. And like the boreal forests, these uncultivated grasslands store an estimated 2 to 3 billion tons of carbon in their root systems. So they stock this underground where it's not getting out into the atmosphere. But once we cultivate them, we dig them all up, we lose up to half of the stored carbon and we no longer have the benefits for the ecosystem. Now, I put this in just briefly, just to show that last winter and in the spring, we had snowstorms, ice storms, flooding. And this woman here, she's hopped into her canoe and she's gone off to get groceries for her neighbors who couldn't get out of their homes due to the flooding. This is on the Ottawa River, by the way. This was on the news. They showed her. So she's canoeing off to the stores to get some groceries and supplies for her neighbors. Now, on the East Coast, I read this in worlddata.info just last month. Hurricanes only occur occasionally in Canada, on average, about 4 times a year. Now, if you look at the past 4 years and you add that all up and you divide that by 4, well, it's more like 5 times a year that we get hurricanes. But anyways, last fall in September, Hurricane Fiona, it was the costliest and most intense post-tropical storm to hit Canada on record. All of these things are setting new records, unprecedented heat or snowstorms or whatever. It's these past couple of years have been pretty bad. So what are some of the effects now? So back over in British Columbia on the West Coast, of course, this is where there's an awful lot of salmon. The salmon comes in, they come in and they spawn. They're called the salmon peoples because this is their culture. They live by salmon. Their food, they depend on salmon and their whole culture revolves around it. So where problems now are that the spawning rivers are too warm, low water flow, changing ocean currents and temperatures as well, reduced availability because the oceans are warming up, reduced amount of fish for them to feed on, And the picture that I have here, these salmon are all dead. They were trying to go back to the spawning grounds. So they go up the rivers, the salmon rivers, they go up the rivers and they go up so far to where the spawning beds are. But once they got up there, there was no water. So they jumped into a dry area and they all died. Millions of them. So women are, of course, the main gatherers and preservers, planners, preparers of food in traditional societies. So what do they do? I mean, the whole society that lives on this, yeah, it's been a disaster for them. So up in the north now, our Yukon Territory, Northwest Territory, the Arctic, they've been experiencing much warmer temperatures as well. The annual temperature has risen 2 degrees Celsius over the past 50 years. The winters are warmer, as you can see. The sea ice is melting, the glaciers are melting, the permafrost is melting. More permafrost thawing as well, ghost fires, because with these forest fires, we might think they're out, but these fires can travel underground and just pop up somewhere else, and they're called ghost fires, and this is happening in the north. The Northwest Territories this year, on the 3rd of May, hit 31 degrees Celsius, breaking the previous record of 27.2 degrees in 1898. So it's never, ever been that hot up there. So, of course, the northern Indigenous populations experience food insecurity, but even the settler women and families who live up in the north too, because if we, for the Indigenous people who hunt seals, the disappearing sea ice reduces the possibility. Okay, the seals are disappearing. Changing ocean currents impact the traditional fishing and whale hunting. And because we depend on our country getting cold and freezing, especially up north, and we can create roads. Okay, so these are roads that are built in the winter, ice roads. So they freeze late, they thaw early, and then how do we transport goods that they need? And this is a problem. So as I said, under the effects, first of all, increased cost of foods that have to be brought north. Settler women as well as Indigenous women are all affected by food insecurity and difficult overland transport of supplies. If we don't have ice roads, there's nothing. There is no other road. So the problematic greenhouse gas reduction policies, I have a couple of examples here because you can see the common policies here on the one side, and the study is advocating for these more effective policies. So subsidies for low carbon technologies, well, okay, but if we have mandatory regulations for carbon pricing, is much more effective. Another problem that has been studied in the past few years is that we have so many jurisdictions, federal, provincial, local jurisdictions, and they do not synchronize or coordinate their policies. So they're undermining each other. So we need to synchronize across all these levels. 74% of the policies help reduce additional emissions. Well, that's good, but what are we doing to reduce the current emission levels? We need policies to do that. And incentivizing electric vehicles, it's okay if we also decarbonize the electric grid, then we will create greater emissions reductions. So instead of just keeping the emission levels where they are, we can reduce them. So a couple of examples that I have here. This is in British Columbia. So electric vehicles under the federal emission standards, they will earn credits that exceed the actual emissions. So we have these extra credits. Now the provincial policy, of course, is zero emission vehicle sales mandate. They incentivize adopting electric vehicles. So people do, but then we have all these extra credits that will enable people to buy cars, regular, gasoline cars. So the regular vehicle fleet. So we still meet the standards, but in the end, there's a net increase in emissions. We haven't saved anything. Nova Scotia as well. So there's a federal carbon tax in Canada, but in Nova Scotia, they have this cap and trade. I was never able to figure out how cap and trade worked, and I still can't. But as you can see, if one industry emits less, like the cap is the dotted line across there. So if there's an industry that emits less, so it doesn't reach that, that's fine, that's great. But then they can trade it or sell it to another industry that can then go above that cap and emit more. And so in the end, we're just shifting costs and emissions between industries or between activities, and we're not reducing anything. So I've always wondered how this worked, and so far I still don't know how this is ever going to reduce our emissions. So now, problematic model for regulating and accounting for greenhouse gas emissions. This is from logging in the boreal forest. So instead of actually using the direct data, you would have data on this and how much is destroyed and the carbon going into the air. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has a rule where we'll just use modeling. So we'll just think about, well, here's a model. This is how it could be working without using the direct data. So it's inaccurate accounting, and it's very conservative assumptions of the amount of carbon stored in these soils. So the attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council wrote, well, unfortunately, while we may be able to creatively account for these things, the atmosphere does not recognize creative accounting. How true. Now, third, in Ontario, I haven't talked too much about Ontario, but the Auditor General has given the Tories, our Conservatives, a failing grade. So a lot of different things here. The one I wanted to mention, though, is this policy where companies can pay to literally destroy a habitat, okay, clear cut, dig up wetlands. There's another, I can't think of it at the moment, but anyways, or not dig up wetlands, but fill them in so wetlands are gone too. Anyways, then they pay, and this money goes into a fund, the Special Conservation Fund, and then the government will use this fund elsewhere to reestablish, to create another ecological system somewhere else. So it's been dubbed the Pay to Slay Fund. So companies, industry can pay to slay, to basically just get rid of a certain ecosystem area, and the government says, well, we'll rebuild it, we'll redo it somewhere else. And of course, another thing is that there's a law, there's the Environmental Bill of Rights, and the government is just ignoring it. As I said here, it's the public's right to be consulted, and the government is not asking the public to come to any hearings or any public get-togethers on these things. So we have an intergovernmental council, the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. So the 10 provinces, the 3 territories, and the federal minister. Reason I have 2 pictures of women is they're the only 2 out of that 13. Only 2 women are on that Council of Ministers of the Environment. Now, of course, Alberta has no incentive to do anything because 25% of their GDP and 10% of governor revenue is attributed to the oil and gas sector. So they want to keep exploiting. I haven't even begun to talk about our oil sands. It's a disaster. Anyway, so they've only implemented about half the number of policies to try to reduce emissions. We're not working together, so we need greater coordination, is what I said. And then, of course, energizing this Council of the Ministers of the Environment. When I've gone onto their website, they're mostly talking about reducing plastic, or there's nothing on there about our greenhouse gas emissions, or nothing very substantial anyways that I've been able to find. They need to have some, definite mandate or be incentivized to do something. So one thing that's been talked about a lot is leveraging nature-based climate solutions. So nature-based climate solutions, which I've been talking about, are boreal forests, protecting them, protecting our grasslands, protecting peatlands. Peatlands, another that Canada has. We have the world's longest coastline. So we have all these oceans around us, all this water. So Canada being home to 25% of the Earth's wetlands and boreal forests, and then the others as well, we have lots of everything. Huge country, we can play a vital role in the global fight, not just Canada's fight, but the global fight against climate change. And when I was talking about the previous one, the pay to slay, as the policy has been dubbed, it's much easier to protect a forest than recreate an entire forest. And an example given, built wetlands are 150% more expensive and worse at storing carbon than simply protecting a wetland. And of course, the indigenous communities and a lot of other people are calling for, let's look at nature-based climate solutions. We don't need more technology. Technology hasn't helped us in the past 30 or 40 years. So let's do something else. And I'm just going to finish my really my last slide here with the SDGs. Number 13 is take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. But 15 is interesting too, because it's protect, restore, promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage the forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. So definitely what the Ontario government has planned is completely opposite. We will destroy first, and then we'll build back. And so just want to thank everyone for listening. And I'm not sure if you want to have questions or if there are questions now, and I can answer some questions. You could do that now or whatever. Thank you very much. Hope I wasn't too long. I had a lot to talk about with Canada. I mean, it's so
Oh my
big.
gosh, Judith, thank you so much for your presentation. I've got questions for when we go into the group chat. So
Yeah,
Jane,
okay.
were there any other questions that came up in the chat?
No, there were no questions per se, but there was one comment from Christine that cap and trade does work if the government will regularly reduce those to slowly push the cap level down. But probably in a lot of situations, once they're set, they don't move.
No, yeah. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for telling me that, because I think I'd heard that somewhere too, and I'm thinking, well, I haven't heard of them, moving on this and pushing it down. So yeah.
Yeah.
Then it might work.
You did an excellent job. I'm an ecologist, so particularly in water birds. And one of the aspects is you mentioned peatlands, where we get a lot of peat that we put into our gardens, and they're slowly reducing the mining of peatland, which is very important around the world. Something else in your garden for organic matter. But wetland conservation, like grasslands, is huge for carbon sequestration, holding more and more carbon in the landscape. And through my background with waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited has worked in both US and Canada, have been really successful in working with indigenous groups and governments and the forest managers to try to put sustainable forestry practices, especially protecting wetlands in those forests that are so important for a wide diversity of wildlife and plants, biodiversity in general. That has been one really valuable avenue of collaborative efforts with nonprofits and governments and indigenous groups to design and make sure that they're implemented much more sustainable forestry practices, or simply setting aside large tracts of forests. So it can be done, and there's been some great movement, but especially in the oil sands, that is just raping the landscape in the peatland, and the political unwilling
oil sands.
economic.
Yeah, the water, like the lakes. I mean, lakes and rivers. Canada has so many of them, but up there where the oil sands are, and so the water is they're toxic. The lakes, they're polluted. The indigenous people can't use them, but you can't let as you were talking about birds and things like that, you can't let them near them. They're all going to die. So they've got like Imperial Oil, let's say, or Shell, or whoever's up there doing this. Anyway, this sort of mechanical bird on a stand or something or other in the lake. I don't know what it does. It makes noise to try to scare the birds away so they don't land. But
Yes.
yeah,
There is, I think there is one question asking about boreal forest, and if you will, I'll explain that. Boreal forest are those forests that are dominated by spruce and somewhat pine, but mostly spruce and peatland type plants. They're usually fairly wet. They like cold environments, but they, their own suite of plants up there. But they need snow cover in the wintertime, and but they don't normally get really hot in the summer, although they are now. But fire is actually a natural part of the boreal forest. It's just that they're drying so much earlier with less snow cover that these spruce forests and the peatlands and all the wetlands that are in them are drying out much faster in the springtime.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And with I didn't there are a lot of things, disasters here, but derecho that came through a year ago, and of course all the wood and if it's spruce or pine or conifers with the needles and the sap and that, they're just on the ground dead, and they are just a disaster waiting to happen. So the minute a fire comes, just sweeps right through. Yeah.
I see that Hasna's got her hand up. Hasna,
Oh.
would you like to say something? Over to you. Will you take yourself off mute?
Mute. Yes, thank you very much. This is a very important presentation from Canada. It actually covers the entire globe. And I think what is happening in the coastal areas, it is much more active than in inland. And Canada proves that. And Bangladesh being in the coastal area and many islands. So what is happening in Canada? If ice is melting, naturally and the glaciers are regressing in the Himalayan mountains. So we are having more water, and then we are flooding and drowning in it, like the Pacific Islands. Slowly, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it is happening. And what else is happening while it's changing in Canada? Our monsoon is also changing. And if the monsoon changes, all our rain will go away. And this entire region, the deltaic region in South Asia, will suffer again from no rain. While Canada was burning, we were having District 25 meeting in Chittagong. And at that time, there was very severe drought and heat. And in Bangladesh and South Asia, in Bangladesh particularly, we are not used to heat. Many people died. We are used to flood and cyclone. So we need to connect also with the tropical, semi-tropical forests. And again, Amazonia, and as you say, boreal, both the forests. We need to connect all these forests. And my concern, and I would like to say that save our ancient forests. That is most important than going out and building and planting trees. If we can save our ancient forests and mangroves, we would keep not only the emission down, we would have found a nature-based solution, not a scientific solution. There, as she said, there is no scientific solution. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. With our ice and melting and the permafrost melting and everything. Yeah, the water is heading down, and the coastlines, the water is rising. Yeah, I mean, it's so. Yeah, talking about our forests and our wetlands and all that, and maybe coordinating all this somehow. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. So now we're going to break out into our groups, and we're going to have a little time to reflect on what we've heard from today's speaker. So here we go. Going back now. I'm hoping that everyone had some wonderful conversations in their breakout groups. I know we went back to some of the early questions about why were they cutting down the grasslands in Canada? What were they doing? And understood that they were doing that to change the crops. And so, it's like, can't they put the crops somewhere else? And then you wonder who's truly managing the resources so that we aren't cutting our nose off to spite our face about what we're doing with climate. And then we talked some about the beetles that are destroying the trees, and how are they connected with the climate? What does the climate change have to do with why we're seeing more of the insects that are destroying? And then we were just talking some about how we are working to engage our Zontians, because people are feeling that there are just so many climate change problems, and they still are not having a very difficult time understanding how that interfaces back to gender and explaining that. So as early adapters to this as a situation from Zonta, we're working on that all together, and I appreciate everyone's effort. So what about the other groups? Pia, what did your group talk about?
Unmute. Yeah, we talked about, we reflected what we heard from Judith, and I said that we also have that problem with the beetle. It's the same kind of forest we have here, and the Arctic problem that the Arctic has heated already several times more than the average of the planet. So the winters are getting shorter and shorter. So yeah, we have the same, and we heard from the other one in our group, Christine we had, and Mafusa, and Eileen. And Eileen talked about your great work with reuse, garbage, taking care of garbage, and the problem to burn it, and recycling. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we had good talks, and we all agreed that Zonta need to advocate about this, and we need to educate more Zontas, because so we all can speak about it. That's the way forward, we think, to speak about it, and then we can advocate to government. And so, and the group, like the think tanks, it's really good to share experience and hear what's happening in different countries, and to get the first-hand information instead of hearing it from the news. And so it feels very exclusive to get it like that. And maybe an idea for the future, we can mix our Zontas speakers with external speakers to get some other input, like twice a year or something. Yeah, that's the idea. That was from our group. Thank you.
Daruba, did you have a group?
Yes, I did. I was with Carol and Spico, and we did discuss.
Jane?
I can
Yes.
give a brief summary. We talked about, explain a little bit more, talk a bit more about the extensive wetland systems up in the northern forests and their significance to whether they're peatlands or just other rivers and lakes in the system, and how important they are for sequestering, storing carbon and affecting the landscape up there and contributing to biodiversity. And there are efforts by Ducks Unlimited Canada and other nonprofit organizations who have been working with forest companies and indigenous groups and others and governments to actually put together much more sustainable forest and protected areas to sustain both the wetlands and the forest systems and the peatlands up there. One of the other key things we talked about were the issues of heat. British Columbia, of course, as Judith mentioned, severe heat. Certainly a lot of our cities in the United States have, but Bangladesh has really been hit hard, because not only have they had unusual heat, but it also goes with humidity, which is just so difficult to survive. And the impact of women's health for a variety of reasons is really significant. It's one aspect that our Zonta talks to talk about how is it related to gender issues or women's issues. Women, especially elderly women, are often the ones who are dying alone or are by these heat waves, often living alone. But maternal deaths or maternal health is also really significant. That, women, when they're pregnant, already have an elevated temperature. They're more likely to be stressed by high temperature, and now that heat stress can lead to lower birth weights, more health problems, and earlier birth dates. But we also talked, so how do we deal with the heat issues? We've got plans. Everybody needs more housing. Where do we put that housing so it doesn't land on a wetland or another natural area, or of course, for low-lying areas that are just going to be flooded out either from natural floods or sea level rise? It'd be really valuable if we could find ways to get funding to those who may have lower income or static income. How can we have programs that will insulate their homes against the heat to keep them cooler? And a lot of our homes in the northern where I live and where Judith lives are pretty well built because we have to survive some pretty cold temperatures. We're not necessarily designed for keeping our homes cool. And in the south, the insulation has never been significant, and the building, traditional building practices, really high ceilings and so on to deal with the heat really doesn't deal with the extremes of heat and humidity we're dealing with now. So how can we do better in retrofitting our homes or designing new homes that stay cool and are more affordable and more livable during heat waves? So, Dilruba, you want to add anything more, or Judith?
Well, you've said most of it. I just wanted to add that in Bangladesh, we are suffering from excessive heat and floods. So, and even in winter, we are suffering because the winters are very, very cold these days, and our people are not well equipped with winter clothing, things like that. So we have to create an awareness amongst the Zontians, amongst the societies, that women must raise their voice against all the discrimination that goes on, the climate change, that is attached to climate change. So that is how we can help everyone to combat the problems of climate change. Women in particular suffer more than many others because of psychological reasons, economic conditions, and financially also they're not well off. So our government is trying, but government can't do alone. We all have to work forward to make sure that things are in its right place.
We have the programs in place to support and make it work.
Yeah.
All right, Carol, at this point, I think I'm going to hand it back to you so you can wrap it up for us.
All right. Well, we've had thank you so much, Judith, for that again. That was really opened our eyes to many things that are going on in Canada, and we share some of those things in Australia and the political landscape, etc. So there's lots of common ground here. There's a couple of things I'd like to mention. Have any of you heard of Women Deliver, the organisation Women Deliver? I came across them the other day, and they've got this, they're having a conference in Kigali in Rwanda in July, but I found out they had 8,000 people attended their previous conference in Vancouver 3 years ago, and 200,000 people attend virtually online. And this organisation came out of sexual and reproductive health and rights at its core, okay? But they're looking at all those intersectional feminist principles, and they're looking at all the issues that compound gender inequality, basically, including climate change, gender-based violence, unpaid care work, and collectively identify and action evidence-based solutions. That to me sounds right what we're doing. And I just thought, wow, I'd never even heard of them. I said, my goodness. And then I looked at their program, and they've got their speakers this year include Seema Bauhaus, who's the executive director of UN Women globally, Helen Clark, who was the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Natalia Carnham, who's the Executive Director of the Population Fund, the UN Population Fund, and Fumzile Mlambo Nkuka, who was the former ED of UN Women, and Malala Yousafzai. So they're all speakers. But when you look at the program, they've got hundreds of concurrent sessions, and it's $300 for the registration, and it's for 17, 18, 19, 20, 4 days. And but it just made me think, you know, just be aware that they even exist. You know, you might find a few of you get together and, you know, share a virtual presentation so you can get hold of some of the recorded events later on. But have a little look at it and see what it is that they do. I was just blown away. I thought, my goodness, you know, I'd never heard of them. So it's good to be aware that there are these organisations out there and see what we can learn from them and what they do. So anyway, it's just wd2023.org. So it's an easy one to remember, Women Deliver.
Mm.
So I just wanted to share that one with you.
Thank you.
I did a quiz the other week for what was it? It's the UN Environment Programme. They hosted the World Environment Day with the theme of Beat Plastic this year. And they had a Beat Plastic Pollution Guide. And I read the book and just made a few questions. I wonder if this will work. I'll just see. I don't know if it'll, I'll just put that over here. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Yes.
See the question, the computer screen? Well, this is from our website. I just want to see if you can see the questions. Can you see the questions? Can you see a picture of a question that says in 2019 plastics accounted for 33%, with the previous and next at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the answer's here. In 2019, plastics accounted for 3.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Without drastic action, what will this number be in 2060? 9%, 19%, or 29%?
Oh gosh.
What do you reckon? 1, 2, or 3?
29.
I'm going to say 29.
29?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
we'll
agree.
go to 29. We'll see how it goes. Next question. Can you see this one?
Yes.
Today, over
Yes.
half of the world's single-use plastics, that's single-use plastics, are made by how many companies? 20,
20.
40, or 60?
20.
20, okay. You sounded very confident on that one, Christine. This one I thought was amazing. What percentage of material made into clothing is plastic? 10,
30.
10.
60? You think 10%?
10. Yes. 10.
Okay, we'll put 10. Next one. When clothing is washed, microplastic particles are released, adding how many tons of plastic to the world's ocean each year? 5,000 tons, 50,000 tons, or 500,000 tons?
50,000.
50 probably.
Okay, we'll put that one. We'll try that. And finally, which country is the first to introduce a policy requiring all new household washing machines to have a filter to trap microplastic particles by 2025?
I reckon it's Sweden.
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 They all reckon Sweden, Pia.
No, France.
Okay, so this is the answers as they come up. Right. So plastics accounted for 3.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. In 2060, it will be 19% of emissions. Nearly a fifth of emissions will be due to plastic. Half of the world's single-use plastics are correct. 20 companies, half of the world's single-use plastics. The percentage of material made into clothing that's plastic is 60%.
My gosh.
We've got polyesters, we've got nylons, we've got all of those things made from fossils. 60%. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
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 When clothing is washed, microplastics, 500,000 tons
Wow.
Oh, wow.
in clothes. And the country
Scary.
is
Right.
France.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But
Eye-opening.
so I thought you'd enjoy that. But
Yes.
I figured you'd learn more from 5 questions about a report than you would by
Mm.
reading a newsletter or something like that.
Mm.
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 A bit more fun.
Mm.
So I'm going to try and do one of these, you know, once a month or something from one report, just so as people can learn about a different thing. But that's just on the Zonta Says Now website homepage at the moment. Anyway, this reminds me, when I saw all this plastic, in July, Plastic Free July have all of their resources and materials to help people stop using single-use plastics. And they're around the world, 190 countries do Plastic Free July. And then also, there's 1 million women that has people all around the world. They have a pledge on their website at the moment to say that you will leave pointlessly packaged fruit and vegetables on the shelf. So things that have been excessively wrapped in plastic in the fruit and vegetable area, not to buy them, to buy the loose ones that you can put into your own bags, you know? So that's just a few things. These are the sorts of things that club members can do. You know, you can show the quiz at a meeting with just a couple of ideas, and it just gets people thinking, you know, of what's around there. Anyway, the next thing is that we've learned today there's so many things that we need to do, and one way to keep things moving is to keep donating to the endowment fund and to the Foundation for Women. And so I want, just before we finish, was there anything else that anyone would like to raise today or to talk about? You're all fairly, Mita, did you have something to say?
Yes, I was probably you asked us to mention it in our report, but you mentioned in one of the reports or drafts that you wrote about being carbon neutral, that Zonta aims to be about carbon neutral. And that is also a bit of a fairly difficult topic because there are so many discussions going on about it. So I was just wondering whether you would do us a little more of clarification about it.
I think the first step with that one will be around, I'm wanting to put a little leaflet together on travel, you know, on different ways of traveling, or when you're traveling by air, for example, to a convention, how to minimize your emissions, you know, travel direct if you can, you know, those sorts of things. And there are principles that we can use in clubs quite easily. I don't see us being carbon neutral, but I can see us thinking about our emissions and reducing them as best we can. And so you have to be quite pragmatic. I discovered somebody asked me a question at a meeting the other day, and they said that they had been on a holiday and they went and separated all of their rubbish and all of their recycling. And then they went to put the things in a recycling bin, but there wasn't one. Anyway, I started looking things up and I discovered that there's a whole organization about sustainable travel. So you can actually see which hotels have got certification for sustainability on recycling, reducing their water, you know, all sorts of things. There's about 20, 30 things on the list. So that's another thing that we can share, that you can actually look up to see if a hotel has got a sustainability certification. Hasna, I see that your hand is up. Did you have another question? You're on mute, Hasna. Her hand's up, but her screen is black. Can't see. No, she's not there. So I just thought I'll put that information together as well and circulate it about the sustainability of what I discovered. But it was really interesting to see. Okay, well, our next meeting is 16th of July. So that'll be at midday, midday UTC time, midday to 1:30 p.m. And we hope to have Maridelos Santos from the Philippines and Eric from India. So we hope to hear stories from them. And so please put it into your diary now. I just want to double check. Hasna, she does have a hand up. Good. Hasna, did you have your question? You're on mute. So could you take yourself on mute and share your question? No.
Yes. We have to also mention about plastic pollution, and we want to talk about deep sea. There is a, the deep sea mining is a very, very big threat on the planet's biodiversity and the planet's future, as well as, big companies are now trying to stop the global plastics treaty. This is something I want to bring on attention. Thank you.
Good, very good point that you raised there, Hasna. And yes, we'll see what we can do to raise some awareness about that. We perhaps might do our next quiz on it. So that would be good. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation today and your contributions. It's been great fun talking to everyone about the different issues that are being raised. And thanks again to Judith for sharing the situation in Canada this evening. And so keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun. And we'll see you in July. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Sleep well.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.
You too.